You're listening to the Childfree Wealth Podcast. We're your hosts, Bri and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, we are back with the book club. And this month, we looked at Sara Geber's Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. And I had recommended this book to somebody on Facebook recently. This book came out in 2018. They're like, hey, does it still hold up? And I think so. And I think it's full of a lot of great stuff for us. But Bri, what'd you think?
Overall, I thought it was a good book and it was very informative. It had a lot of details in there, but I do think the title was a little bit misleading, especially because it says a retirement and aging roadmap for single and childless adults. And she talked a lot about couples in there. And I think that is kind of unfair to put that on your cover and then talk a lot about couples.
That's fair. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. Throughout the book, there's this discussion a lot about friends and groups and couples and people. And essentially, her belief is if you're going to retire well, and that, by the way, this is not talking about finance, really. But if you retire well and age well, you need a community. So she talks a lot about community and the people around you. So I'm not surprised it has couples in there. You're right. It is not just a soloist book, but it's kind of a somewhere in between, but at least it's talking about child-free, childless, or aging without kids. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I liked that. She talked about, well, everybody's going to be a soloist at one point and kind of really harped on that idea in the beginning. And while that is true, most of us eventually will either pass and will be, our partner will be alone or we'll be alone. I don't think that it is fair to say that you are a soloist throughout your life because your ability and resources are different, especially if you are in a dual income household. Talking so much about couples and everything and, well, they're going to be soloists too, isn't fair when as a couple you have more time to build up resources, and that's not the reality for soloists.
Yeah, and just a terminology thing. So we use the term soloists instead of saying solo agers because some people, I don't want to age, so I'd rather be a soloist. But we're really talking about people who have no kids, no spouse, no partner, and they're doing it on their own, which, by the way, about 32.1% of childless folks will never marry. So I think you're right that it is different for the people that will never be in a dual income, the people that were and then something changed or life or divorce or widowed or... You're right. There is a difference, but there's also some things that are similar.
Yeah, I agree with that.
My first read on this book, what was amazing to me is it's really written for boomers, and it literally talks about talking to boomers. So I was really interested to see how that hits you, because it is, I'm Gen X and closer to the boomers much more than you are. How'd that hit you?
Honestly, I didn't really think about it too much until you had said something. And just for listeners, typically we don't talk about the books before we record them. And we did have a brief conversation earlier on when we were still both working through reading this on it. But normally I don't know opinions. So after I heard that, then I did think more about it as I read it. But it didn't really bother me that much because I have a very strong belief that not every piece of content is made for every single person, and you have to be able to distinguish that, and you can't just be offended by things and upset with everything. Yes, it's talking to boomers, but it is still applicable and still has good points.
But the internet has taught me you can be offended about everything. So you just said...
I don't live by that.
By the way, if you're thinking about, hey, should I read this book? One of the questions that to me is who this serves best? And it's really kind of people in the mid-50s to 60s kind of looking at what's that last third of my life look like? And how do I do that? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it definitely spoke more to that. I thought it was still beneficial to learn from that, though, and learn from somebody who has that life experience.
Yeah, she's looking at it from, kind of a PhD, research, sociology, science, psychology, life perspective, not necessarily a financial perspective. which is, by the way, why this book doesn't really age much, because most of it is the same. You had 3 things you took out of it. What's your first one?
Yeah, the first one is build a community for yourself, because having social connection is really important for aging and just life in general. So getting out, joining groups, building different communities is essential.
Okay, so how are you doing that?
Well, I am a big trivia fan. I'm horrible at trivia, but I just like to go to talk to people. I'm in plenty of hiking groups that I go. I talked about it before. I definitely prioritize seeing people and seeing friends and getting out. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm much more of an introvert, and I'm reading this chapter on the connection, the community, and all that, and this is where I have a little bit of a, I don't know, love-hate thing going on with this book. She's really talking about building community so you can rely on them. That almost feels a little like icky to me. Like if I'm making friends just so that I can rely on them to give me a ride to the doctor's office, I don't. Ugh, doesn't feel right. Now, by the way, I'm also the person where if I'm your friend, I will offer to drive you to the doctor's office. The friends that I make right now, I love taking care of and getting to know the people, 70s, 80s, 90s, the older, usually guys, and helping them out. And that is a role I enjoy doing. I don't know about asking other people for it. And I don't know, maybe that's just me. I mean, her argument is because you're solo, you have to build that network. And then I go, yeah, but maybe the definition of friends or networks or communities are shifting. I mean, do you see it at all, Bri, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful to, like, she does talk about, relying on them. You have to be careful to recognize, though, that you don't necessarily need to only build a community just to rely on somebody else to help you with things. Like, I will absolutely do things for people, love to help out friends, but just that social aspect and social well-being and then mental stimulation is important too. And so getting out and meeting people and learning things, because people with different life experiences, especially if they come from different backgrounds, as you can teach you so much and make you grow so much. That's important.
Okay, but this is the introvert-extrovert in us fighting, because I deal with different people all day long. Yeah, we'll go through 5-6 client meetings on a rough day, and plus I got to deal with Bri all day long. I'm joking, but like...
I'm the hardest one.
I deal with people all day long. The introvert nature of me, when I get done with this, I am like, let me go veg, watch some TV, play some video games, hang out. I am not going out on Thursday night to a trivia. I'm asleep by 9 o'clock. I'm in bed by 8:15. I mean, I read her stuff and I'm like, good concept, but I'm also, it's not for me.
Yeah, and I think that it's also, like, you see me as a very extrovert person and out there and outgoing, but it's important to recognize that I wasn't always this way, and I have been very, very intentional, especially in the past year, about going out and meeting people and doing things and putting it on my calendar. And it's been hard, but it's been good, because even though it was really hard, and the first few times I did, I would just sit in my car like, feeling numb with anxiety before I'd go into things. Now it is much easier to do that. And yes, we hear from people all day long, but at the end of the day, they're clients and we know a lot about them, but they don't know much about us. Like, you and I both have never said our wife's name. Like, but they don't know that.
My wife prefers it that way. Like, she gave me a lecture today. I told her I was recording podcast. She said, don't talk about me. I'm like, well, I can't promise that. Which is,
Yeah, but like, you and I both keep our wives very private, and we don't talk about them, and clients don't know that. You can't be a recluse. Gotta go out.
Why not?
With people.
No, seriously. Because, okay, this is what annoys me. People always want to change introverts. They're like, don't just sit there, go be part of the group. And I'm like, no, I'm perfectly fine at the party, sitting in the back corner, drinking a Diet Coke, and watching the party.
Okay, that's literally what he does, because I've been acting with him. He does
literally,
that.
She saw that at FinCon. That's a separate episode. We'll go through. But, like, I'm actually okay with that. The old joke is introverts, we should unite when we want to in small groups and not at a party. Like, I hate to say it, but people like you are trying to change us, and Sara, saying, hey, we need this community.
I'm not telling you.
So part of what I like with the client record, for those that haven't worked with us, our relationships with our clients are deep. Okay. I mean, we know everything about them. We are in there. We are there for them 110%. I actually like that I'm able to protect, kind of some of my own life, my things, and I've got boundaries and all that. That works great. Do I want to do small talk with 100 people in a room? No.
I'm not saying go to a room with 100 people. I'm saying, like, even one or two.
Oh, we're going to trivia night with 50.
Oh my God, no. You know what I do at trivia night? I talk to my like 6 friends that we all go together. And
Right, but I have friends that are online. I mean,
okay,
isn't that
but
okay?
yes, but my point is just have like a few close connections. You don't have to have 10,000 friends. That's not what I'm saying. Just like some close connections you can talk to, and it's not all work related.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to just agree to disagree on this. I mean, people who are child-free often ask kind of like, where do I make child-free friends? And that's a good question. That happens to be why I have friends that are older. That I'm thinking of the friends I have that are 80 plus and they have a whole bunch of grandkids, but it doesn't impact their life. I've never met any of their grandkids. They don't care if I have kids. Probably people closer to your age, they're dealing with their kids day in, day out. So it's a big difference. I think
friends.
Well, then you got lucky.
Some officially think friends. Yeah, I didn't.
That's not where I'm at.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When I started this podcast, I was originally my co-host with Matt, and Matt was in Denver, and he started doing child-free meetups, and he had a huge group getting together. Now, I mean, huge in my mind, it's like 30 or 40 people, but I mean, like, he had a huge group, like, within weeks of announcing this meetup. That happened to be the community. That happened to be a group. I think also you could have the online friends, the online groups, the different people. I don't know that they're all the same, but then I have friends that are all over the country. None of them are going to fly here to drive me to the doctor's office. Because that's part of what she's making this argument. This is one of those that I think her advice fits well for people who are good at making those connections. I think the assumption that you need these connections and you need that community to be local, I don't know that I agree with it. You know, I'm thinking of somebody I worked with, and the husband is very much more like he's going to be on his own, like doing art in the corner, and his wife is a social butterfly. That's okay too. Yes, for the soloist, it's more important, but if you're a soloist and introverted, that's another book, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. It is. I'm not saying like they have to be in person and go to 100 people, but just like, I don't even care where your close friends are. My closest friend is 1,000 miles away. That's fine. But just have somebody.
I have friends. You make it sound like I have no friends. I just am not going to trivia night and 50 people there. I don't know. I'm one of those weirdos that like doesn't have kids, doesn't drink. So therefore, all of a sudden, your opportunities for social become very limited.
Okay, I don't like to drink either, though. And I'll maybe have like 1 or 2. Like I didn't drink for a few years. But I'll still go out. Just because I go to a brewery doesn't mean I have to order a drink. I can order a Diet Coke, which is what my drink too. But you can still go out and do those things at places.
All right. What's your second point of the book? I'm going to give in on it a little bit, but go to the next one.
Okay, number 2, prioritize your health. Taking care of your physical and mental health on a regular basis is going to help you throughout your life.
I don't know any retirement book that's not going to have that in there. Like, that's not special to soloists.
Well, I know, but it's easily forgotten because we all are chasing things. And, okay, how many times do we talk about, like, making sure you're prioritizing your health, both mental and physical? Mental health, we talk about when it's, like, open enrollment. You're like, hey, you have 10 free mental health visits. Like, go use them or go to your annual appointments and, like, preventatives. But taking time to do that regularly throughout the year, not just when you're like, oh yeah, I get it free because my insurance. We don't really ever mention that.
That's fair. I mean, I think this is one of those things. So when I went to get set up as a primary care doc, I was in my mid-30s and went to the doctor, and the doctor says, you're a mid-30s male, you're here in my office, either you are dying or your wife said you have to go to the doctor's. And I was like, I'm not dying. Because I mean, we have it all the time with clients. So as you tell guys, hey, you got to go to the doctor. And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. My arm isn't falling off. I'm good. And that's not the right thing. I agree. But I mean, I think of my neighbor. So I had a neighbor. He was a really nice guy. I bought a property from him. He was 70 years old and lived on his own, happy. He had kids, but yeah, they come visit once in a while. I went over and talked to him. All of a sudden, he had some medical issues. Come to find out, he had like massive cancer. And he goes to the hospital. I went to see him. I said to him, hey, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. I was talking to his daughter. Turns out the last time he had seen a doctor was when he was enlisted in the Korea War, which is like forever ago. And I found myself jealous because here he is at 70-something, went 50 years without seeing a doctor, gets cancer, dies, out, gone. And I'm like, if you could be healthy, took no meds, nothing, maybe an aspirin. If you could be that healthy for your life and then all of a sudden out, I'm actually okay with that, even if it's not the most amount of years. But I don't know that I'd follow. He was a heavy drinker and a few other things, but we've all got our poisons. But you're right, that health balance is important, and one that I don't take care of as much as I should. The interesting thing is, it's mentioned in here. Now we're really talking about when you're 50 or 55 or 60, really what we should have been talking about when you're 30 or 40.
And I believe women start losing bone density when they turn 30, I want to say. It's pretty young. So you want to work on building up muscle, and I'm a big proponent for strength training, all of those things to help you throughout your life. One
of the weird things I did for a while, I actually owned a kettlebell gym. And this is when kettlebells first started coming out. And I did the HKC, the RKC certification, all that. And the trainer there said it this way. We had a lot of clients who are older. He says, the most important thing to train yourself to do is get on and off the toilet. He says, if you can't do that, everything else goes downhill. And I was like, huh? And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, that makes some sense. By the way, kettlebells does a lot of hip work, a lot of squatting, happens to work perfect for that. And I was like, you don't think about the lack of mobility, all that. As soon as you can't get off the toilet, you need help. You need somebody there, and especially your soloist, if there's a problem. He's right. By the way, I'm not saying kettlebells is right for everybody, but it's just one of those, it's one of those movements that we need to practice.
Yeah, and that is true, having the mobility. I had a trainer in college at this gym I went to. Love the guy to death, from Boston, heavy, thick accent. And he would say different things, and so you couldn't always understand him. But one of the things he always made to very clearly say was, get up and down off the ground 10 times. And that was part of almost every single workout, was practicing getting up and down, and then also not using your hands to get up and down.
That's fair. So, all right, we'll take care of our health and get friends, which, by the way, at this point, I'm like, really? I read a whole book about getting friends and getting health.
Yeah.
What's the third point?
Plan ahead. It's easier to make decisions before a crisis hits.
Talk to me about it.
All right. Well, as with anything, let's say specifically talked about end of life and long-term care. If you ever had to move a family member into long-term care and it hasn't really been planned for, even if it is planned for, it's not the most enjoyable experience. It's very hard on everybody. But having a plan and knowing what's going to happen, or taking time to research things, is much easier than all of a sudden going, oh no, we need to fix something today.
That's fair. I think the other thing I liked in here is she had a really good explanation of different levels of care and facilities. So you'll often hear us talk about if you don't have a long-term care plan, you end up in Medicaid care, which is not the top. It's just a Medi-Cal, because California has their own Medicaid. Yep, not the best care. Most people want to stay at home, but that has a cost. We have assisted living, we have skilled nurse facilities, all that. And one of the interesting things, I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but we had worked with clients on it, but I think it's one of those I'm going to probably do a whole other podcast on, was she had talked about going into continuous care retirement communities, CCRCs. And that's a fancy name for the villages or all these communities where you start in a 55 and older community, then you have assisted living, then you have skilled nursing, and you keep going up. But a lot of these are kind of getting luxurious. It's kind of if you got the money, you can get the good care. Now, by the way, our long-term care system broken, needs to get fixed. There's a whole bunch of issues. But I was thinking about it for our clients and saying, what if we, instead of setting their goal of making sure long-term care is covered, shift it to, okay, and by the way, you're going to get into one of the luxurious places versus being in. She had a quote in the air from a story of somebody who said, hey, they moved into the facility. She checked with them and they said, how'd you like it? And they said, I wish I moved in earlier so I could take advantage of all the events, the things, all the social stuff that Bri wants to take care of. I'm like, that's actually interesting. And I think my aha there was, we're going to see a lot more of those. Now, by the way, it is a have and have not routine. I'm just saying this is a luxury thing. Maybe we shift our clients and say, all right, let's save enough money or insure or whatever it is to plan to get out. I saw somebody recently who tried to get a place in Virginia. It was something like $600,000 to buy in plus a certain amount per month. So, we're not talking cheap. But then you get the higher level care and you can start at the 55 and older community and work your way up as you need it, which is actually a perfect solution for a soloist. absolutely perfect. But it really means we got to put like $1 million aside to get you into one of those. Because remember, long-term care is increasing by 5% each year. So, it's a big deal. But it was interesting to me to see the perspective of the different levels of care. What do you think?
Yeah, and I felt like she talked about all the different levels of care twice in there, which was kind of annoying. It would have been nice to just have it once and then done by just the longer thing. I did like how she went through all of the different continuing retirement communities and then like what skilled nursing is or what, having somebody come to your house is. All of those different things was very nice and well laid out. I personally am a big fan of like the villages setup, and I frequent the villages in Florida, which is a very odd statement.
Just for the fun of it?
My friend lives there. It's my place.
One thing she did get wrong is, and by the way, not really wrong, but kind of wrong, is you can actually get into 55 and older communities without being 55.
Yes.
So about 20% of their residents can be below 55. I always kind of joked, but I think it's not really a joke, that 55 and older communities are perfect for child-free folks. Mm-hmm. My wife and I literally were looking at a movie, and I'm like, I saw this great place, and it had a dining hall and all this, and then I realized, it's a 55 and older community. But I was like, it would have been perfect for us. Like, it's got fun stuff to do, got all the amenities, so.
I thought you weren't going to do the fun stuff, though.
I didn't say I was. But you see, my wife is more of a social butterfly, so she can go do those, and then I can just go do my thing. You got to think about this. If you get those things for your wife to do, then you don't have to do them.
Mine comes along with me regardless. It's like, you're coming.
The book then, in Bri's world, says, have friends, keep healthy, and get a plan.
Yep.
All
right. A great way to sum it up.
One of the things I was looking for in here is just because it's what I've been working on, is what's her answer for who makes decisions for you when you can't? I've been
friends.
Your friends. Like, literally, that is her answer.
Yeah, I don't agree with that answer.
But I was like, okay, there's millions and millions and millions of us child-free folks. And the healthcare and the government and the long-term care systems all assume you have next of kin. And who makes decisions for you? Her answer was friends. Her backup answer, so in California and Arizona, she quoted that you can get a professional fiduciary to do it for you. In some other states, you may have a voluntary guardianship or conservatorship, which is essentially the person the court would appoint to you, but you choose to do that. But that only really covers you when something really bad is happening. And I was disappointed. I'm not really. I was looking for her to have an answer that I've been looking for 2 years that I haven't found. And she didn't find it either. So it's kind of I'm disappointed for the child-free community. And we're actually working on creating a new product to help child-free folks with this, and stay tuned. It'll probably this time next year we'll have it out. But we're trying to solve this problem because it's a huge issue for the soloist. If you don't have a friend or family member you trust to make decisions for you, the government's making decisions for you, which I don't trust at all. And there's not a great option. I mean, did you see anything in there besides find a nice friend?
No, did not have a great option for any decision making, which was unnerving.
The one thing they did mention is the Golden Girl setup. Yeah, so we're going to co-house, we're going to share. Interestingly enough, there are some links, and we'll include them in the show notes, of essentially friend finders, but for senior living. So you're I want to find a friend to live with. That was actually a really cool idea. I'm I like that. And maybe have a group of 4 people, and you're all watching out for each other. Then they had an example where somebody in the group got sick and they're taking care of them. That's a valid answer. Not for everybody. Mm-hmm. I think that's the hard part of that. They also talk about, the old school communes in different ways, intentional communities. Those are all ways to do this. The problem is the healthcare and the legal system not really well set up to handle people without next of kin. They just blow up. And that's kind of my criticism of this book is, yep, I agree with you, have good health, have some friends, but then we get to the reality of whatever else. What if the friend I made dies before me? Then I have nobody to make decisions for me. I mean, am I crazy here?
Yeah, it doesn't really work in a circular fashion, because if you're going to put your friend and they're going to put you, well, one of you is dying first, so things aren't going to work.
Yeah, she does a great job of addressing a lot of the issues, but this is one of those that I don't think she talked about professional guardianships, but those aren't really a great option either, and it depends on what state. If you cross state lines, it becomes a problem. The problem I'm trying to solve is My wife and I are in a car. Now, I'm 45, so I don't have a professional guardian because I'm not old like the book says to do, although Bri thinks I'm really old. But
My God.
we're in a car. We get in a car crash. Who makes medical decisions for us? Who pays our bills? And who comes to our apartment and lets our dog out? Those are the questions that are the hard ones. If you're a soloist, same problem. If you're a soloist and you're traveling, well, they don't even know where you are or where your dog is or what your life is or whatever. That's the one that keeps me up at night, is trying to solve that problem. But I was hoping Sara would have an answer. I'm not judging her because there's not really an answer. But she had researched it too. I was like, okay, cool. Find me the answer. And it didn't get there. Is that fair?
That is definitely fair. I think the book could have been aimed at younger people and like with the things I took away from it, because at the end it didn't really give you an answer of what to do or who to turn to.
So what's your rating on the book?
3.
3 stars. That's not great.
I know. It was just okay. Like, I wasn't overly in love with any of it, but I didn't think it was bad. I think it had a lot of good links, and some of the articles that it mentioned were interesting to read and had like good tables, but sometimes it got to be a little bit long at times.
All right. So 3 stars. And who would you recommend it to or not recommend it to? Kind of like who should read it and who shouldn't?
I honestly think for most books, everybody can read because they can take something away from it or learn something. And even if you don't, you can be like, well, at least you got to taste it with a different perspective. But primarily those like closer to your age, the Gen X and
older than me, okay? Like seriously, like the 50, 60. I'm not that old yet.
Yes, you're not old. But that's a good time to start thinking about it because we always talk about having a plan in place for long-term care by your mid-40s.
You know, you're probably right, somewhere in the mid-40s, but I don't really want to read about old-time life yet. It is the nature. I think you're right. Something in mid-40s, 50s, if you're kind of going, how do I do this? Great. It doesn't address the financial components, which is, we've got some other resources on that. So go into it, assuming it's about life and retirement and how that works. It's got a little bit in there about finding a financial planner. Some of that data is a little old. My recommendation is always to find an advice-only financial planner if you're child-free, but that's a separate thing. But overall, to me, it's a great read for child-free folks, a little different perspective. You're probably right. It's a little more than just the soloists. You can go there. All right, Bri, you've got our next book. Bri's got a book assignment from me. I think it comes from Instagram, so I'm ready for it.
This was put a poll out on Instagram or a question box for people to answer. But our next book is going to be Get Good with Money by Tiffany Aliche. So we'll be reviewing that for December.
All right. I will pick it up. I'll start reading, and we'll have to see if we trust the wisdom of the crowd. So if you have another book recommendation, throw it in the show notes, throw it in Instagram, whatever, on the social things, whatever. I don't know any of the socials. Bri makes fun of me for it. It says I'm old because I don't know socials, but that's okay. Whatever social thing or bower you're supposed to do that. And we will pick it up as our book after that.
All right.
That's all for this week's episode of Childfree Wealth Podcast. Be sure to follow Childfree Wealth on social media, email us at podcast@childfreewealth.com, or visit our website, www.childfreewealth.com.